Hello my friends, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. My microphone just died on me, so I'm recording through my phone today. So hopefully my voice is loud enough. I'm gonna try to speak at a slightly above normal volume, speaking volume. Yeah, so today I want to keep it concise and short. I know I say this in many of my videos and I often fail, and then I yap and I yap and I yap and the video ends up being 30 minutes long. So today I want to keep it concise, and today is anecdote time. I want to tell you about the time I met a shaman, or was he a shaman? I don't really know. Back when I was in Spain, in the south of Spain. So when I was still at university, in my fourth and final year of university, me and the whole class, we were a group of 25 students approximately. We all went on a field trip to the south of Spain. It was in early September of 2022, right at the start of the year, and it was a wonderful experience. I have a ton of great memories from that trip. And what was great is that it was all organized by the uni, and we had to pay, I think, £120, if I remember correctly. It was really not that much money at all, considering that we paid £120, and then the university covered for the traveling fees and the accommodation fees as well. We flew to the south of Spain, of course, from Edinburgh in Scotland. And oh, pretty cool car. We flew to the south of Spain, to Alicante, and then we got a bus that took us to that desert in the south of Spain. I should have done my research before that video. I didn't. I'm freestyling, I guess, because I want to keep it authentic. But now that's a shame, because I forgot the name of that desert. But it's a relatively famous desert because that's where Sergio Leone decided to shoot most of his spaghetti western movies in the 1960s. I guess the most famous example of these spaghetti western movies, for those of you who don't know about Sergio Leone or the spaghetti western movies, the most famous one would be the good, the bad, and the ugly. Yeah, they're called spaghetti western movies because Sergio Leone is Italian, and he would film in the south of Spain because the location and the landscapes are very reminiscent of the Wild West of the United States of America. And of course, Clint Eastwood was often playing the main part of these movies. Very memorable. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. So that's where we ended up going, in that desert. And we stayed in a research center, like a research facility, right? That was designed for students and yeah, classes from all over Europe to go there and do some studying, because that desert in the south of Spain is very interesting on many different levels. I studied biology, right? Evolutionary biology, to be more specific, and that desert has a very interesting biodiversity, very different from that of Scotland, of course, what we were used to thus far into my studies. So the idea was for us to go there with the class and conduct a 1 week long experiment in that desert. So we would form little groups of students, and then we had to go our own ways into the desert and find a research study topic. We would pin it down, you know, and try to extract some interesting biology question, research question, out of that specific thing we were looking at, right? And then the idea was to collect data throughout the week, bring them back to that research center, and the teachers would be here to support us and assess what we were doing, of course, and give us some ideas and help us find interesting questions um, to raise in the study. Um, but I mentioned that this area was very interesting for universities all around Europe because not only is it rich in terms of biodiversity, but there are also very interesting geological formations. I'm not a geology expert, but I remember we would walk around the desert, and sometimes you would find a cave that was covered, and all the walls were covered in sand crystals, things like that. So yeah, I guess these are the two examples that come to mind right now, biology and geology, but there were many other potential fields of studies to be covered in that desert. Stunning place. If you ever want to visit a desert in Europe, I guess the south of Spain is the way to go. Anyway, but now I'm getting lost in too many details again. Let's stick to the main topic, shall we? So we went there in early September of 2022, but there happened to be a heat wave at the time. As a matter of fact, at the time of recording this video, there is the fourth heat wave of the summer of 2026 hitting France. It's very warm. I'm just coming out of the shower and I'm already sweating profusely. It's a bit annoying, but anyway. Hence why I have this bottle of water, yeah? Anyway, so there was a heat wave in Spain at the time. I think we would reach the 40 degrees centigrade temperature at the time. So it was really nuts, bonkers, yeah? And why am I saying this is because in the afternoon the teachers couldn't ask us to go out in the desert and collect some data. It was because they advised us to stay inside in the shade, to not get a heat stroke or anything like that, right? For our safety. Of course, we stuck to the rules, not. And so we would work in the morning as much as possible, and then in the afternoon was time off for us. And where we would stay, there was a small hotel as well. Not a hotel, more like a house that was turned into an Airbnb complex. And the owner of the place had built a pool. And the first day, we all rushed for that pool for obvious reasons. But we weren't allowed to because we would stay in the research facility. And the owner of the place didn't want 25 students to be in that pool when it was meant to be for the Airbnb customers. So they kindly asked us to fuck off after the first day. We couldn't go to the pool. And that was a tad frustrating because we didn't know how we were going to survive the heat, and it wasn't fun. But we had heard through the grapevine that about an hour walk away into the desert there was an oasis, a natural oasis, and that if we followed a very thin stream of water, which was dried out actually at the time, so we had to sort of guess where that stream of water would be under normal circumstances. It was like some kind of a trench or a ditch, I don't know how you can call that. But anyway, we were told that if we follow that stream, it would eventually lead us to the oasis. So the second day, it's the afternoon, and we decide, fuck it, we might die of heat in that desert, but let's give it a shot. Let's follow the stream and try to find the oasis, which now in retrospect I realize how stupid that was and how dangerous it could have turned out to be, that expedition. But we did it anyway. So we start walking to the desert, absolutely stunning scenery, you feel like you're in the Wild West, and there are really interesting plants and insects, and there used to be orb weaver spiders. For those of you who don't know, they're like these big spiders you find in very dry environments. And actually, the orb weaver spiders were the topic of the study that we had chose to do some research on in my group. So yeah, anyway, side note. And so we're walking to the desert and everything is stunning, great, but very dry, very hot. And after 1 hour of walking in the desert, there start to be more and more vegetation. So of course we're thinking, okay, we must be getting nearer, and the stream actually started as well. We could see some water. So we keep walking. Everything is just heavenly, like sand crystals on these massive cave walls, and the mountains, with the lighting and the shadows, that they would look like a thousand faces. It was quite surreal. And eventually, after 1.5 hour of hiking through that desert, we finally reached the oasis, and it was just as beautiful as what we were promised. No, that was not English, but they told us it was a promising thing, and it reached the expectations. Large oasis with little signs that said you're not allowed to put sunscreen on if you're planning to go swimming in the oasis, because there were populations of wild tortoise living and swimming about in the oasis, and we could disrupt the environment by applying sunscreen on. Yeah, just a detail to give you an idea of how wild and untouched and preserved that oasis was. And there were like wild bushes and fruits growing around the oasis as well, all kinds of exotic fruits. In a way, it almost felt like we had reached the Garden of Eden. In a Garden of Eden, baby. Uh, Anywho, so we're swimming into the oasis. There was a small cliff. I mean, small, as in smaller, I would say maybe about 10 meters, tall. That was diving straight into the oasis, so you could jump from that cliff into the oasis. It's paradise, man. What a brilliant place. And there was a small village attached to the oasis, but it seemed to be abandoned. At least that's what I first thought when we arrived in the oasis, because there was no sign of life. But now we'll get to that point of the story, of course, but it was not abandoned. It was inhabited, but probably everyone stayed inside that day because of how hot it was. So we're swimming in the oasis, we're having fun. There was maybe 10 of us, and everyone was very tight in that class, in that class I was in university. We were like a good group. Everyone got along. It was really great. And we're chilling. We're having fun there. And then there's a group of people coming from the village, the nearby village, and they join us at the oasis. They have a swim. They jump as well. But we haven't broken the ice yet, right? And at some point, these people, they spark up a joint, and of course we smell the weed. And at the time, at university, we would sometimes indulge with the devil's lettuce, I guess. And whenever we had the opportunity to cope a little ganja, we would try. I guess I was the less shy in the group, so my friends just asked me to go up to them and ask them if we could get a little za, a little ganja. So I did. I went up there and said, hey guys, cool. I remember I complimented one of the guys on his sunglasses to sort of break the ice, and said, oh, I dig your sunglasses, man, they're sick. And I had pretty cool sunglasses at the time as well. Not the ones I'm wearing today, but another pair of sunglasses, with kind of the cyberpunk, no, not cyberpunk, cyberpunk type of aesthetic, with some metal shades on the sides like that. Cool sunglasses. And so he returned the compliment. He said, I like yours. So we exchanged sunglasses, we start having a chat, and after a while, of course, they offer us the joint. So we partake. Then we asked them if we could have a little ganja for later on in the day. Yeah, sure, no problem. I had a 10 euro bill on me, so I gave them a 10 euro bill, expecting them to just give us a tiny tad of weed. Give us like a pretty big bag of it. Wow, cool, man. And it turned out that these guys lived in the village, and they explained that they told us the story of the village, that it used to be inhabited by some local population up until the 1930s, and then everyone left to go to the city. How do you call that in English? The rural exodus. l'exode rural is how we say in French, when people leave the countryside for the city. That's what happened, and then for decades, that village was proper abandoned, and it fell into ruins, and nobody cared. It just disappeared. And in the late 60s, early 70s, a bunch of hippies started a community there. Um, they rebuilt some of the houses, and yeah, they formed a community. And there was still a handful of those hippies from the 60s who were still living in the village back when we were there, but just a handful of them. And obviously, they were pushing in their 70s, 80s. So new people had arrived, and this bunch of alternative uh, fellas and gals, hippies and free spirits and freedom fighters, these kinds of people. And I feel like it's always interesting to meet anyone and to be curious about what they're about and all that. But in my own personal experience, whenever I would bump into people who are a bit alternative and live outside of society, they always have rad stories and that. So I was quite eager to meet some of these people. So we asked that group of three guys with whom we became friends at the Oasis that day. Oh, can we come back tomorrow? We have to leave soon and go back to the research center, but can we come back tomorrow and meet some other people who live here? Yeah, sure, man. And then they told us that they were staying in the house that was at the very top of the village. Because picture, it's not a mountainous area, but it's all on hills and all that in the desert. And they said we stay in that house with the yellow curtains. I remember when they specified this, the yellow curtains at the very top of the hill in the village. And so we said, bet we'll come tomorrow. We'll come by and say hello. And so we decided to leave the Oasis after we had encountered these folks back into the desert, and we had our little za, and then we realized we didn't have any paper to smoke it once we were back at the research center. So we improvised, and we had a tool that's called a puter, Putter, I believe is the right spelling. It's like a small box like that with a lid and two holes on the lid with two tubes sticking out of it. And one of the holes is covered with a little grid, with a little filter, if you will. And the idea is to suck from the tube that's connected to the gridded hole, and with the other tube you can aim at insects if you want to collect insects in the wild, and you suck in and they get trapped into the little container, and then you can bring them back to the research facility and study the insects before you release them into the wild. So that's what a putter is. And we had to lock in. I remember that was really funny. And we turned that putter into a little bong, right? So we used that for a bong. I still have it because I kept it as memorabilia, I guess. Brought it back home for the memory, right? And so that was good fun, we felt like we were a little bit like rebels and little thugs, because of course we weren't supposed to smoke weed while being on a field trip with the university. But oh well, young, wild, and free, I guess. So we have a great evening with the whole class, and we're having a good time. And there was a small saloon right by the research facility center. Now, the more I describe that place, I realized that you're going to think it was a massive place. It really wasn't. It was a small house that was the Airbnb, another small house that was the research center. As a matter of fact, you can see it. It was used as a filming location for The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, that research center. So it's a very old house, right? And there was a saloon, entirely made out of wood, exactly how you would picture a Western saloon, with one bartender in it and a pool table, and all he had to serve was cervezas, una cervezas por favor, and massive speakers on the wall, and he would let us, give us the aux, and we could play whatever music we wanted to. So it was good fun. We had a blast. And the next day we do our uni work in the morning, and in the afternoon, again, it's too hot outside for the teachers to ask us to do any work. And we decided to go back to the Oasis. But this time, the owner of the whole housing complex offered us a ride. So he drove us to the oasis because there was a small road leading up to that village, you know. And I guess he kind of knew what we were doing there. You've met some of the hippies there. Yeah, 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 they're cool people, you know. Good vibes only. So we go back, we go for the swim in the oasis first of all, and then we decide to go up in the village, go up to that house with the yellow curtains, and meet up with our friends. So we go up there. There are dogs everywhere. It's like a sea of dogs welcoming us, not threatening at all. And just a bunch of hippies living there. Hey guys, what's up? Super chill, you know. Obviously, I feel like they were probably baked out of their minds from sunrise to sunset and beyond. Um, I'm sorry, I don't want this video. I don't want the point of this video to be about weed smoking. That's not what makes it a great memory, of course. It was a little plus, a bonus, I guess. But yeah, just to illustrate as best as I can for you to picture that scene, you know, with a bunch of hippies just relaxed as hell in hammocks and all that, you know. And they show us around, and there were artists, you know, with paintings all over the walls, psychedelic paintings, and they had rebuilt that house by themselves with their own hands. And they were staying with this guy, David. Uh, at the time we met him, he was 74 years old, so I'm guessing he's probably turning 80 this year, if he still lives there. Super friendly guy. He was just wearing very short shorts, and that's all he was wearing. And bald guy, and super friendly. Had like stories for days, you know. And yeah, and there was Josh, who was the owner of the house. Really cool dude. He's the one we had met the previous day at the Oasis, and there was a group of Germans who were staying with them only temporarily at the time, and I just want to give them a shout out because they had this crazy project of traveling from Germany all the way to Japan on bicycles, right? Not motorbikes, proper bicycles, cycling all the way there. I'll give them a shout because they have an Instagram page. I'm not on Instagram anymore, but if I remember correctly, the page is called Perma Cycle, Perma, and then cycle, all attached. Sort of document their journey. Absolutely mad. They left from Germany, of course, traveled through France, all the way down Spain to meet up with Josh because they knew Josh from Germany, and to stay there for a few weeks. And then they would continue with their journey. And I've been following their journey a little bit, but now I don't have Instagram anymore, so I have no idea where they are in their journey. But very inspiring people, you know. And they had this massive tank to distill their own alcohol. They would make absinthe and homemade corn liquor and things like that, like moonshine, I think you call it. And yeah, they could be a little extreme sometimes in their lifestyle, right? But they were also very inspiring and very friendly folks. What I mean by extreme is obviously they would smoke a lot of ganja, but they also had peyote cactus growing in their garden. So for those of you who don't know, it's a cactus that I think contains mescaline, which is a pretty potent psychedelic substance. So they had that in the garden, and they grew marijuana as well. So that was the first time and the only time, I think, in my life that I got to see actual marijuana plants growing in the wild. Oh, it was so moving, you know. And they would grow all sort of plants, not just drugs, of course. In their garden, they also had vegetables and fruits and all kinds of herbs growing in the garden. Beautiful place with the dogs everywhere, like butterflies, birds flying by. And we ended up staying the whole afternoon at theirs. They had this little, how do you say in English, a little terrace in the front of the house, and in the shade. It was super relaxing with some music playing, of course, and we were just there chilling, having a good time with them. And then David, the 74 years old guy I mentioned a minute ago, all of a sudden he goes like, oh, you know, he tells us about these stories that in his youth, in his younger days, when he was in his 30s, he traveled all around the world, and he ended up in the depth of the Amazon forest, and he was staying with a tribe of indigenous people in the Amazon forest, and they completely welcomed him into the tribe, and he went through different rituals, initiation rituals, to be part of the tribe, to become one of them. And so he would describe all of these rituals to us. Quite interesting, fascinating, really. And then he told us that he stayed there for a few years in that tribe, and eventually he learned the ways of the shaman, which brings us to the title of the video. After, I don't know, 20 minutes, I said I was trying to keep that video concise, but I'm not sure this is working out. Anywho, so yeah, that brings us to the title of the video. Him mentioning that he learned the ways of the shaman in the Amazon forest, and they taught him how to make ayahuasca tea. Again, for those of you who don't know, ayahuasca is basically a brew that's mainly composed of two plants. One of them that contains the DMT molecule, again a very extremely potent psychedelic substance. I haven't tried DMT or mescaline or any of these things, but from what I've heard, they're potent substances, mind expanding drugs. So that's one plant that contains the DMT, and the other plant, I think, don't quote me on that, right? But the other plant has another molecule that sort of keeps the DMT compound active in your brain for 6+ hours. When usually DMT, I think, is a volatile substance that only lasts for some time. Definitely not 6 hours. Anywho, that's what he was explaining to us, yeah? And he said, like, oh yeah, I brew ayahuasca here. Would you guys want to be a part of it? And oh no, what the fuck? We're not gonna take ayahuasca. We're still on a field trip. We're still meant to go back to the research center and like interact with the teachers and all that. We can't be tripping out of our fucking brains, you know. So we declined. But they offered us some weed as we were leaving, and I remember they gave us a bag. I'd never seen such a big bag of ganja like that. And we said, no, we're leaving in 3 days. There's no way we can finish smoking that up. You know, just give us a little bit, right? We weren't big smokers or anything. And I remember they all kind of laughed. So, oh, really? We could smoke that in 3 hours, you know? So it was quite funny. So anywho, that was all very surreal for me at the time. You know, I'd never been in touch with alternative people like that who live completely outside of society, and pretty much on a daily basis they would basically consume what was growing in their garden to sort of expand their minds, or is what they were telling us, you know. Then of course you're entitled to your own opinion. You can think that, oh, that's just junky behavior or whatever, and why would you need to take drugs, and what's the point? And I somewhat agree to that. I think that being sober is the best state of mind ever, and I don't need no crutch. I can expand my mind by myself and learn more about the world and about myself, and you know, you get the point. So what I'm saying here is I'm not promoting substance consumption or abuse in this video at all. I'm just describing what I saw on that Spanish trip. But it was so interesting to me, hippies like that. Obviously, I'm a big fan of 60s music, rock music, and from a young age, I've been almost fantasizing that time of the 60s and the counterculture movement, and I always thought it was great, but now I guess I'm more conflicted. Notably because I've read the book Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson, and it's a very clever book, right? People think that it's just a silly story of a guy who goes to Las Vegas and just gets fucked up non-stop for 3 days on end, but there's actually an underlying message in that book, and it's Hunter S. Thompson who's explaining why you think that that counterculture dream of the 1960s was just utopia, and that everything collapsed and it was a big illusion, and people came back to the senses in the 70s and realized that it was all rubbish, which is one opinion. I think with as with most things in life, I just felt it. I think it's starting to rain. As with most things, I don't know how to pronounce, in life, you need to be balanced, right? It's not all black or white, yeah? It's more like in the middle, always. So I think the hippie movement in the 60s, and now I'm going on a big tangent. I want to conclude on that quickly because it's not the main point of the video. But I feel like the hippie movement was great in some regards, you know, against, in America especially, when there was the Vietnam War, or the way there was a war, a, a class war, right? Only poor people would be sent to the war, for instance. As, what's that fucking song again? Fortunate Son, yeah? And also segregation at the time in America and all that. And I feel like the hippie movement and the counterculture movement was a step in the right direction to sort of call that bullshit out and say like, no, we can do better than this. But I also think that it was pushed to its extreme, and that in a way there wasn't just good things about the hippie movement. Let's put it there. Anywho, to come back to my anecdote, we walked back to the research center. The rest of the week was absolutely brilliant. We had a blast. And then when it was time to go back to Edinburgh to conclude on the story, right? Our plane was 3 hours late, so we had to wait for 3 hours. Oh, big deal! In the air-conditioned air of the Alicante airport, and as a result, we got our flights reimbursed. And we didn't pay for the flight, right? Remember, we paid £120 fee to cover all the expenses for the week, but we got, everyone in the class got the the final flight reimbursed, and it costed £340. So we made money on top of that week. We made more money than we had spent. Anywho, and we got back to Scotland, and we would tell all of our friends who didn't have the chance to come with us about the oasis, the desert, the beautiful things we had seen, meeting with the hippies, all that stuff. Because there was so many great stories to tell. And even in this video, I kind of just went over a lot of the cool things that happened to us all while on that trip in Spain. And it was so memorable that at the end of my final year of uni, a year later, the following summer, my two friends Danny and Michael and me, we decided to go back on our own to the south of Spain and meet up with the hippies and sort of conclude the whole thing, because it was one of the best memory of our university, our time at university, was that trip to the south of Spain. So we went back, and it was different. It was a different vibe because we had more freedom. We could do whatever we wanted. There was another heat wave. I remember we arrived in that small Airbnb we were renting out in the middle of the desert. And that day was 47 degrees centigrade. That's the hottest weather I've ever experienced in my life, by a large margin too. And we decided to walk into the desert to the oasis again. And my friend Michael is from Austria, yeah? And Danny's from Scotland, and I'm from the northeast of France. So we're not accustomed to such weather, such extreme weather. And I remember Michael was leading the way, walking through that fucking desert to try to get to the oasis. And at some point he turned around and it was red, as in red, like a stop sign, you know. And he was like, guys, I don't think we should do this. I think it's dangerous. We're like, oh, fuck. And we all felt the heat, you know, we were like inches away from a heat stroke. So we rushed back to the Airbnb and we called it quit for the day. But we did go back to the oasis. And I guess that can be the topic for another video, what happened on that second trip in the south of Spain. But yeah, I want to conclude it there. It was a quite informal video today, as you can tell. just a silly anecdote of some cool shit that happened to us while on that field trip. That's very memorable, pretty cool, and in a way, I almost want to say it gives you a sense of hope, you know, that people like that still exist in this world. And obviously, you won't meet them on the internet, on social media, or whatever. You have to go out there, explore the world, and meet these alternative minds who will give you their views on the world. And it's always interesting because you get to hear and see another lifestyle, another way of being, and it just expands your mind in that regard, you know, genuinely. And you don't need any fucking drugs for that. You just need to meet people and travel as much as you can, if you can, you know, however you can afford it or wherever you can go. Just go outside of your town and be open-minded, be curious, and shit like that will happen to you, you know. It's kind of corny that I want to wrap this video up with some kind of message or some kind of advice. But anywho, here you go as a piece of advice. Yeah, poetry is everywhere, definitely. Peace, love, and music. Take it easy, guys. See you tomorrow.